Hi, my name is Ginny, also known as Two-Thirds Lotus, and this clip is part of my series analyzing the Essential Bukowski, edited by Abel DeBrito. Nothing has been edited out, so you're seeing this exactly as it was streamed on Twitch, with all the imperfections and tangents of a live stream. If you want to learn more or catch me live, make sure to check out the description, otherwise enjoy the incredible work of Charles Bukowski. So a little bit of a longer one, it looks like, more like a prose poem, which is very exciting. So I'm going to switch here, and God, that fade is way too long. You've written like 3 poems today. That is so awesome, Charting Devil. I'm super stoked about that. Sometimes we write lots of poems in a day. Sometimes we only write like a line, but as long as we're writing or reading, then we're doing good. In fact, last night, I actually spent some time just reading a book for the first time in kind of too long. Like, I feel like it's been a month since I've just sat down to read a book. I'm starting The Marriage Portrait, which is sort of already, it feels like a very exaggerated version of the story of Lucrezia de Medici. She is also the topic of a poem called My Last Duchess by Robert Browning, which we've talked about on stream and I made a TikTok about. And we'll see how I like that book. I mean, it's sort of, going back in history and doing like the, here's a story and we're gonna tell it from the woman's side, and sometimes those work really well, sometimes they're kind of awful. Not that writing is ever awful, but just not my jam, a little too sometimes on the nose. And you're starting a fourth poem. That is crazy. I'm super happy that you write a lot now. It's cool to me. So, The Best Way to Get Famous is to Run Away by Charles Bukowski. What an excellent title. I feel like I need to talk about this at some point, how I feel like Bukowski really is a master of the title. They're all very, very catching. So, I found a loose cement slab outside the ice cream store, tossed it aside, and began to dig. The earth was soft and full of worms, and as soon as I was into my waist, size 36, a crowd gathered, but stepped back before my shots of mud. And by the time the police came, I was in below my head. Frightening gophers, eels, finding bits of golden inlaid skull. And they asked me, are you looking for oil, treasure, gold, the end of China? What are you looking for, love? God? A lost keychain? And little girls dripping ice cream peered into my darkness. And a psychiatrist came, and a college professor, and a movie actress in a bikini, and a Russian spy, and a French spy, and an English spy, and a drama critic, and a bill collector, and an old girlfriend, and they all asked me, what are you looking for? And soon it began to rain. Atomic submarines changed course. Tuesday Weld hid behind a newspaper. Jean-Paul Sartre rolled in his sleep, and my hole filled with water. I came out black as Africa, shooting stars and epitaphs, my pockets full of lovely worms. And they took me to their jail and gave me a shower and a nice cell, rent-free. And even now, the people are picketing in my cause. And I have signed contracts to appear on stage and television to write a guest column for the local paper and write a book and endorse some products. I have enough money to last me several years at the best hotels, but as soon as I get out of here, I'm gonna find me another loose slab and begin to dig, dig, dig. And this time I'm not coming back. Rain, shine, or bikini. And the reporters keep asking, why did you do it? But I just light my cigarette and smile. Okay, Charles. This is definitely probably very different from everything we've read from Bukowski. I don't think in here we've had something quite so comedic. Certainly the cynicality is no new topic, but this is a very funny poem. In part because there's a truth to it. Me too, it gives me something to do, lol. Yeah, we were talking about how much you're writing. Having something to do is great. Not that doing nothing is a problem. Some people would say doing nothing is an enlightened activity, so that was something different, right? I know. Slightly crass, as Bukowski tends to be. But quite the poem. Quite the poem. I'm going to read it again in a minute after I drink some water. Okay. I found the dogs are barking downstairs. I'm going to close the door so we don't hear them so much. Okay. I've had a good morning so far today. Maybe you can tell I'm sort of in no rush to, work, and I'm just patiently taking my time. I walked the dog for like 2 hours this morning. We just kind of wandered, and it was very great. And I've just been taking it easy, and that's nice. But the best way to get famous is to run away. I found a loose cement slab outside the ice cream store, tossed it aside and began to dig. The earth was soft and full of worms, and soon I was to my waist, size 36. A crowd gathered, but stepped back before my shouts of mud, and by the time the police came, I was in below my head, frightening gophers, eels, and finding bits of golden inlaid skull. They asked me, "Are you looking for oil, treasure, gold, the end of China? Are you looking for love, God, a lost keychain?" And little girls dripping ice cream peered into my darkness. And a psychiatrist came. And a college professor, and a movie actress in a bikini, and a Russian spy, and a French spy, and an English spy, and a drama critic, and a bill collector, and an old girlfriend. And they all asked me, "What are you looking for?" Soon it began to rain. Atomic submarines changed course. Tuesday Weld hid behind a newspaper, and John Paul Sartre rolled in his sleep. And my hole filled with water. I came out black as Africa, shooting stars and epitaphs, my pockets full of lovely worms. And they took me to their jail and gave me a shower and a nice cell rent-free, and even now the people are picketing in my cause. And I've signed contracts to appear on the stage and television, to write a guest column for the local paper, and to write a book and endorse some products. I have enough money to last me several years at the best hotels, but as soon as I get out of here, I'm gonna find me another loose slab and begin to dig, dig, dig. And this time I'm not coming back. Rain, shine, or bikini, and the reporters keep asking, why did you do it? But I just light my cigarette and smile. The best way to get famous is to run away. It's funny, right? Because he doesn't literally talk about running away in this poem. Running away, in a sense, might mean disappearing and not being able to be found. So it makes me ask, the best way to get famous is to run away from what? What is he running away from in this poem? Through digging underneath the slab outside the ice cream store. I have no clue what the poem means, but I do like it. I think I have a clue what the poem means. And let's figure that out. And I think asking questions like this is important. If his title is The Best Way to Get Famous is to Run Away, and then he tells us this poem as clearly a way to get famous, he gets famous, but he's not necessarily running away physically. He's not going into hiding. Yet, I think he's running away from something still, because he said he's running away from something. What is that? They all ask me, are you looking for oil, treasure, gold, the end of China? Are you looking for love, God, a lost keychain? In this sentence, the people ask, right, why are you doing this? Give us a rational reason. Help us make sense of your action. If he was looking for a keychain, people would be much less interested, probably, because they have an explanation. If he's looking for the end of China, if he's looking for God, if he's looking for treasure, those are explanations, perhaps ways to chalk him up as crazy. They want something that makes sense. What's up? I hope you have a good stream. I'll be lurking. Welcome in, EJ. I'm glad you're here. Your stream, I quite enjoyed the, hour or so that I was there. I thought it was quite a good time. So, and EJ is another one of our October streamers. So let me, EJ _ Sean. Shout out work. There you go. If you all are looking for another cool writing streamer who also... You were the one doing like hip hop, like singing, right? And writes cool stories. Go check out EJ. Cool person. Cool October streamer. They ask me, what are you looking for? Looking for oil, treasure, etc. Looking for God. They want an explanation. And if they could make sense of Bukowski's actions, he would be so much less interesting. So much less of a sensation. Right? It is being this confusing, dirty, crazy seeming sensation that Bukowski has found fame in this poem, and fame in many regards. Because everyone's interested in something they don't understand, or afraid of. But if no one knows what you're doing, no one knows why you're doing it, you're making a fuss, and it seems to be important, you're gonna catch eyes. Of all sorts of people. Professor, spy, critic, old girlfriend. That's fame. I think it's funny. Tuesday Weld hid behind a newspaper. Jean-Paul Sartre rolled in his sleep. Just describing the degree of fame one can achieve through whatever this running away is. And if fame comes from not making sense, and that is what he's doing, and that is running away, well then perhaps he's running away from understanding the expectation of society. We know that Bukowski is very opposed to the normal ways of society. We know that he has a disdain for capitalism from his previous poems. We know that he values poetry over all else, but also in a way fails to do so. We know that Bukowski is this walking contradiction. And of course, he accrued some degree of fame in his life. Through a lot of it probably being someone who ran away. Someone who contradicted what was normal for society. Someone who said things that other people didn't want to say. Someone you could not expect what they were going to do. Someone who they couldn't make sense of. That has its allure. That is what I think Bukowski says. And I think that's a really important thing to understand about Bukowski. Because if the only way, or the way, the best way, according to, the best way to get famous, according to Bukowski, is to deny those societal expectations, to be someone different, to be a voice, and be this unique, confusing, contradictory item, then it sheds a lot of light on the way Bukowski likes. I need to find a way to up my literary skills. I'd love to analyze things the way you do. I appreciate that you think the way I analyze is admirable, and I would like to say that it is difficult, but it's something that anyone can do. And I'll get back to that point. Maybe I'll try to tie in. I'm going to tie in that point with what we're doing in this poem right now because I think it matters. So Bukowski talks about defying expectation. Defying society, being someone different, essentially, and that being an avenue to fame. And he lives this, and he shows it in his other poems. He shows it in, I think most particularly so far, Layover, making love in the sun, in the morning sun, in a hotel room, above the alley where poor men poke for bottles, making love in the sun, making love by a carpet redder than our blood, making love while the boys sell headlines and Cadillacs. Making love by a photograph of Paris in an open pack of Chesterfields, making love while other men, poor fools, work. This poem, in particular, I find references the separation between Bukowski's desire to make art and make love and make beautiful things against the societal work, the people who live with their heads down. And those are the things that we look for in art. If I had a piece of art, right, a piece of writing that is exactly the kind of writing that society already accepts and knows and understands. Art that is common. Then, Gin and Juice, Nico, welcome. How are you? We're reading Bukowski and talking about art and uniqueness and running away from society. Art that is common may, of course, have some amount of success because people are comfortable with this art. This art is easy. This art is popular. However, it tends to be that the art that runs away from what is common runs away from the common is the art that finds success long-term or on a big scale. You know, people look at those who are famous and they say, oh, they're all doing the same thing. Let's say pop music right now. Let's take Taylor Swift. But in the early 2000s, maybe? Is that when she started? Mid-2000s? She was the only, like, kind of country-adjacent pop girl writing songs about breakups. Like, she did that first. And she found something that people loved that was different from what was probably normal country music. And she found amazing success. And obviously it ended up moving to a more poppy style, but that is what she did. And of course, now that she's hit this like apex of her career, she seems like the common. And that's why we need subversions. We need angsty music that's not about the breakup, the Billie Eilishes, for example. Or some people don't want that. They want... I mean, that's how it is, right? Billie Eilish, this darker, moody kind of response to pop music in many cases. And I'm going to finish some of these thoughts after we have the ad break. Please make sure to stand up and do not actually watch the ads. Take care of yourselves. And drink some water. Go to the bathroom, etc. I think the ad is going. Probably. Is the ad already happening? I really struggle with the Twitch dashboard and it telling me accurate information about my own stream. C'est la vie. Is the ad over? Are we back? If so, welcome back. I'm still Jenny, still known as 2/3 Lotus on the internet. If you're still watching ads, I apologize for the plight of capitalism, but you shouldn't be watching them anyway, so on you. Okay. Running away from what is regular. You might also describe that phrase that makes art unique, that makes art successful, that, as Bukowski says, brings you fame. You might say running away is saying something. Saying something new, particularly. But that sort of idea that if you're not saying something new, are you really saying anything at all? Interesting question. Lots of different angles you could take to that one. And you asked or you mentioned how I analyze things, Drowning Devil, and how you want to analyze similarly. And what I would say is listen. It sounds like really crappy advice because you're like, you want a process, you want rules. But if you're trying to find that something that someone is saying, right? Then you ought to listen. I would not suggest you bring in your own set of rules and ways to analyze and processes. I have a slight process. It's really just like read it a few times and then have some colors. But what I'm trying to do, let's say, in reading something a few times first, is to not jump in with my analyzing and really listen to what the work is saying. And that's going to take time to build that skill. I'm sure we all know some people talk a lot and aren't good at listening. And if that person wanted to be better at listening, they would have to practice it. And I think it's fairly chronic, being not very good at listening to art in general. And that's no fault of people, that's no fault of society, perhaps education, but it's because art is saying something different that we haven't heard before. And if you can find something new in art, listen more. There's always something new. If you want to understand how I think about analysis, it's maybe just that rule. There is always something to listen for, to hear. In that sense, there is always something, I think, in a piece of art that runs away from the normal, from society, from your knowledge. And in that sense, it's something that can be famous to you, something that can be valuable and unique and interesting and sensational. So, Bukowski, being a cynic, looks at this sort of rule. This rule that people are attracted to things that they don't understand, and things that are new, and things that are strange. And Bukowski the cynic says, well, if that's the case, there's no I there, cynic, if that is the case in life, then I should do something crazy and disruptive and make a fool of myself. And if you can do that, you can make art. And you can make people care. You can be famous. And Bukowski, of course, it makes sense that in his writing, he does this. All of his work is reflective of this. He was, one of the first, notable American poets to be writing with such crass, pointed, cynical language. Something that's really hard to kind of appreciate in poetry, which had been, and still in some case is, thought to be a beautiful and sophisticated art by some. So when Bukowski goes and writes a poem like, friendly advice to a lot of young men and a lot of old men too. Brush your teeth with gasoline, sleep all day and climb trees at night, be a monk and drink buckshot and beer, hold your head under water and play the violin, do a belly dance before pink candles, kill your dog, run for mayor, live in a barrel, break your head with a hatchet, plant tulips in the rain, but don't write any more poetry. Bukowski says things that don't make sense to us, and that are crass, and that subvert poetry in its entirety. I think if I had to describe what Bukowski does in very simple terms, in all of his poetry, it is to run away from, at the time, what were sort of the conventions of poetry and the art form itself that he was creating. It's harder to see in the modern era, 50 years removed from Bukowski, I think, because we're used to the cynicism. We're used to the internet and the irony and the cynicism and the depression and the world, which is kind of miserable for most people. And that makes Bukowski feel sort of not unique in a lot of ways. But he was doing this very, very early, and he was, like, that's why I started the Bukowski Twitter account, because I think he would just be an excellent shitposter in the modern day. He still aligns 50 years later with a lot of modern, or it's turned into that now he aligns with, like, modern sensibility to be cynical about the world. We live in a very cynical age. So yeah, it's easy to not like Bukowski as a cynical, whining guy who is pretty easy to cancel. But that just shows, like, the change. That other people began to run away from this. And then now we have something new to run away from. We can't run away from poetry being a beautiful, sophisticated thing, because that's not what it is anymore. Nico said in the last stream, poetry is of the streets. And it is now. Poetry lives very often not in the university, not in the libraries of the wealthy. Poetry is in the streets. And that is a question. If that is the convention now, that is poetry, if we are all writing poetry, we draw an arrow. How are we? How are you? As an artist, as a poet, whoever watching, whatever art you take, whatever art you do, how are you going to run away from the current ideas of poetry? How are you going to do something different? I don't always like performing stand-up, spoken word in front of people and doing the spoken word voice and sounding like a spoken word poet. Because in my opinion, that's normal. And I don't want to do that. It's sort of an odd take, but it's not my interest. It's not a convention I like. Old forms of poetry that are written now and days aren't taken seriously. I think people are more attracted to what I've seen. Yeah, Insta poetry. I do think we should talk about Insta poetry. And exactly, you also have this other modern convention. This is not the only modern thing that poetry does. There's Insta poetry. And there's poetry as an online thing. I personally, am one of the only people doing poetry on Twitch and doing the Poets of Twitch. So maybe that's my way of running away. But how do we run away, let's say, from Insta poetry? If that is a question I had the perfect answer to, I would probably already be doing it. But for anyone who is a poet, aspiring, established, or otherwise, and if you, in some sense, trust the words of Bukowski, which may be wrong in a lot of cases, then maybe you should try running away from Insta poetry. Because people have taken that and they've ridden it to a point of popularity. And it may stay popular for some time, so it might not be correct to run away from that convention right now. But once, let's say, Insta poetry starts to feel tired and no longer new, interesting, a sensation, once it becomes expected, then people are going to need to find something to run away to, as they themselves run away from convention and find something new to enjoy. I haven't read Gabby Hanna particularly, or in particular, and I'm not even familiar with the name, but perhaps I can investigate that. I could look at some of her poetry today, and we could talk about Insta poetry. That's an option. But regardless, if we are to listen to Bukowski's advice here, and we want everyone to look at us, and we want people to look into our hole, the psychiatrist, the college professor, the spies, the bill collectors, other artists, Jean-Paul Sartre, as he says here. If we want people to picket in our cause, if we want to appear on stage and television, perhaps the first step is finding a way to run away. That's fair, but I'd rather not write a poem like, "My mother used to touch the iron and see it was hot, and I don't know, I think there is something poetic there." That's something that Gabby wrote? Interesting. Yeah, and if something like that, Insta poetry, is, in your opinion, something tired, something that's coming to the zenith of its time, then be the person who runs away from it and write poetry to challenge Insta poetry. And be that person, right? Heavy analysis today, Zam. It's funny because this is an extraordinarily funny poem by Bukowski, and that's something else. Humor is often very rooted in truth. Sometimes the funniest things are the unavoidable truths that at a certain point our only option is to laugh, is to find comedy. And Bukowski says, if I want to stay relevant, I have to do the things that run away to get me famous in the most extreme ways. And he shows us this nonsensical image of him digging a hole under a cement slab. And that's like a scary thing. It's a scary thing to be new, and it's a scary thing to run away. And it's also funny in some cases. In Bukowski's case, which he's certainly good at being funny in his poems sometimes. But that's roughly my thoughts. My initial thoughts. Because I could come back to this poem again, probably tomorrow, and have just as many thoughts. And that's a struggle with this series kind of format, where I go to this poem, and then I go to the next one, all the way through the book. Is I only get to give you all my thoughts once. And sometimes I do revisit the past poems, flip back during one of these, but that's my thoughts on the best way to get famous is to run away. Also, I should probably specify, Gabby is more known for her YouTube videos than her poetry. She was just the first Insta poetry I thought of. Sure. I don't know her either way. So, does anyone have any other questions about Bukowski? I've been talking lately on stream mostly about ideas and more upper level things, and not the poetry itself. Does anyone have questions? Because I could go into trying to pull meaning from all these different characters he uses and try to dig into his specific word choice and the things, I could talk about what makes this poem comedic. The brakes on. What are you looking for? And soon it began to rain. I don't know. It's just the book formatting. I don't know if it's and soon it began this. What are you looking for? And soon it began to rain. Yeah, that's curious. Bukowski does this sometimes. I've noticed this trend in his writing. That's a fascinating thing to point out. Interesting little bit of... Okay, so here's what we're looking at. A Russian spy, and a French spy, and an English spy, and a drama critic, and a bill collector, and an old girlfriend, and they all asked me, what are you looking for? And soon it began to rain. And Nico is asking, why do I think, or can we talk about Bukowski putting for here instead of what are you looking for? If I were reading, I'd put heavy emphasis on looking out loud. Interesting, because I read this as putting emphasis on... I guess looking has its own line. Yeah. I would put emphasis on each, probably, if I was reading. And maybe we'll talk about... Yeah, so what are you looking for? And soon it began to rain, because they're separate spaces. But why do we do stuff like this? And a psychiatrist came, and a college professor and a movie actress. Shooting stars and epitaph, and my hole filled with water. Page poets versus performance poets again. Yeah, and I'm a page poet, I would say. But let's dig into these. And let's find some other examples of Bukowski doing the same thing. Having like these single things. I'm not going to do it in this poem. And my whole Charles. Here's an example. He howled and he roared and he screamed, and downstairs his landlady said, I knew it, that rotten son of a bitch has dummied up his brain. That's interesting. So what does this do? What does this little bit of formatting do for the poem? Nico said that she would put more emphasis on looking there because probably looking as a word here has been given an entire line to itself. The previous thing here, college professor and a movie actress and a bikini and a Russian spy and a French spy and an English spy and a drama critic and a bill collector and an old girlfriend, and they all asked me, what are you looking for? Interesting. Maybe that makes all of this a little less important compared to looking. He's maybe just listing off a bunch of characters for the sake of having a bunch of unique characters in this section. But what he really wants to say is there's a ton of people and they're all looking Or they're all asking, what are you looking for? Yeah, speed is less important. When you stop and say looking for, and soon it began to rain. Atomic submarines changed course. Tuesday Weld hid behind his paper. Jean-Paul Sartre rolled in his sleep, and my hole filled with water. And I came out black as Africa, shooting stars and epitaphs, my pockets full of lovely worms. Oh, well, I'm thinking I'm going to submit one of the poems I wrote today. Read it whenever you like. I'm just doing it now. Awesome! No space on the submit. My hole, yes. Thank you, Bukowski. Filled. And my hole filled. Look, we know what hole he's talking about. He's talking about the hole he's digging in the slab under the ice cream store. There's no other hole. Plus, it's with water. Shooting stars. Yeah, pretty much. And even without kind of verbal acknowledgement, if we're not performing this adds a kind of weight. And it breaks up the poem in a nice way. It allows for a push and pull of tension and release that we've talked about. I found a loose cement slab outside the ice cream store, tossed it aside and began to dig. The earth was soft and full of worms, and soon I was into my waist. Size 36. A crowd gathered but stepped back before my shots of mud. And by the time the police came, I was in below my head. Frightening gophers, eels, and finding bits of golden inlaid skull. And they asked me, are you looking for oil, treasure, gold, the end of China? Are you looking for love, God, a lost keychain? And little girls dripping ice cream peered into my darkness. And a psychiatrist came, and I wonder why he specifies his waist size. Oh, let's see. We love the anticipation. Yeah. Of mud. My head inlaid skull. Oh, so you want that very, very articulated. That's how you would read it. Insecurity, Lamau. 36 isn't a huge waist. Wait. What am I? I'm like, my waist is like size 30, I think. So 36 would be like an adult who's not like super tiny and skinny, or would that just be like a little bit of like a dad bod? Like a beer belly? Because he probably definitely had a beer belly, right? 36. I'm just gonna assume this is like beer belly size. I don't mean to specifically talk about like judge that. It's just like size, but no, it's fat phobia, beer belly as well. I mean, I don't personally judge. He's Bukowski, and I care a whole lot more about his poems than his waist size. As goes for all people. But why he specifies that? Potentially just imagery. Potentially to give you an image of Bukowski, who's like probably not in great shape, and he's this like dude who like smokes and drinks, and I guess if we're calling that beer belly size, but I don't even know what size 36 is. Like, I have no idea what to picture, and I can't visualize things anyway. As a fat person, I see that as a little zinger, a little hee-hee. Oh, Charles, okay. Yeah, and I mean, like, he's doing like physical work, digging. So it's probably just to emphasize the absurdity of the situation. He's not some like manual laborer who's super fit. He's like Charles Bukowski, the beer belly poet, and he's digging a hole in the ground with his hands. You know, like that's probably what he's saying. Maybe. Do you have other ideas? We're going to take another self-care ad break because the ads are starting soon. And everybody got different interpretations. Yeah. So, but yeah, it could be just self-deprecating. He's Bukowski. That's his jam, right? Who knows? Only Bukowski really knows, and that's the beauty of the poetry, right? The interpretations. I'm also not that skinny, but I don't really see it as much of a zinger. Interesting. See that? Oh, interesting. Wait, shit. Maybe I should have submitted 2 performances of the same poem instead of just a 6-month time skip. Yeah, I know you submitted something, so it's multiple poems for me to, like, compare. That being said, I need to stop saying that being said. Oh my gosh, call me out whenever I say that. I'm going to start the ad break. Y'all are going to drink some water, go to the bathroom, take care of yourselves, and then we will mosey on back and I guess keep talking about Bukowski because he's great. Ad starting soon. Ad in progress. Shark. Stretching the stick. Nico, I guess you can still hear me. You can always resubmit and just say that you don't want the previous one. Welcome back. Welcome back. Okay, so we were talking about interpretations of Bukowski saying that he's fat. It's funny, he says outside the ice cream store too. Maybe adding to that. But I think that's just a little bit of imagery, a little bit of irony, in my opinion. But the good thing is, like, Drowning Devil. So that's the thing with art. Finding a way, your idea of how this is him running away. How is this him saying something? Right? The question is, what is he saying? And it takes a little bit of empathy, but it's really just asking, if I take someone like Bukowski, And it can help to know more about Bukowski, but otherwise you have to talk in a more general sense. Take a poet. Why would a poet mention this? If we're talking purely as a literary tool, then he's mentioning it maybe for imagery and a better idea of what's going on, a little bit of irony. It's a comedic poem. That's an option. But you can also think about Bukowski from a personal level. Nico, you said it feels like a little zinger, and that's perfectly awesome as your interpretation, and I maybe like it a little more than mine. I don't know. So there's that. I do think it's interesting, combining with what we were talking about before. Remembers that I haven't performed the same poem for enough months. Is what it is. I haven't performed in a bit. You know that, though. I'm using my bamboo pen to point at things. Why does he put this on its own line? Right? Having that on its own line maybe does give a little bit of credibility to, like, it being a little zinger, because it stands out. Maybe it's because he finds it really, from my interpretation, maybe because he wants that irony, that imagery to stand out. Maybe it's a completely different reason. You know? I don't know. But the good thing is, you can look at structure if you want to interpret a poem and say, well, what things are placed on their own little line? Waist size, mud, my head, inlaid skull, and looking. And those are places sometimes to start. What is that saying? It's easier to find the places that seem the most important and ask what those are saying. I started on this one with what is running away. I started with the title. Title is sometimes, not always, the most important part of the poem. Sometimes it's the least important part. Depends on the author. But I talked about how Bukowski, I think, is a master of titles. And I think, in the case of Bukowski, starting with the title is good. I want to perform, but I know I'd only end up crying on stage from my social anxiety. Yeah. It's hard. It's very hard. I do have some suggestions for that. I think what I'm going to do, though... Yeah, I'll just talk. I think this is fine to go in the VOD. So, my suggestions on performing, because I think you should at least try it. I think there's no reason to not try something new. Try something that is you running away from what you are used to. If we are to reference our own work here. My advice, though, for a new performer is, if you don't have that, like, confidence to just go up on stage and you feel like, oh, I'm gonna make a mistake, all of this stuff, like that, you know, that might not be the entirety of the anxiety, but there's certainly part of it that says, I will look stupid if I mess up my own poem on stage. You kind of will. I mean, you won't, because there are so many people out there who are like, oh, look at them, they're doing their best, they're awesome. That's usually what people think, or at least what I think. Maybe some people are actually super harsh judges, but at open mics where other poets are, like, if you can find something like that, you know, go to a venue you're comfortable in. Find, let's say, an open mic that happens regularly, and go there every week, if it's a weekly one, and become comfortable, and meet the people, and watch other people fuck up. It sounds kind of mean, but the more you watch other people on stage mess up, and then recover from it, and then keep going and have that confidence, is going to show you that you can mess up and still continue and be confident on stage. So, find a comfortable place, and when you're going to read, don't do what I did. It was my first open mic. It was at college, actually, which I don't even kind of count it as my first performance. It was this open mic in the student union, and I had some poet friends who were new friends in college, and they're like, you should read. And I'm like, all right. And I had a really good poem. I still have it, Singularity. I've read it before on stream, that I was going to read. And I'm like, hold on. Why would I read something that's like so old? I want to read something new. So I wrote a poem in like 30 minutes. Oh my gosh. Unknown Soul, welcome. That is a lot of people. Wow, 24. Thank you so much for the raid. It means a lot. Super stoked. Badgers. So many badgers. So many badgers. Thank you for the followers. Thank you for the follows. I appreciate it. Right now we're talking about Charles Bukowski and also how to perform as a poet. But I guess I first should say, for anyone new, I'm Ginny, also known as 2/3 Lotus, everywhere on the internet. Let me switch to this. I'm Ginny, and we do lots of poetry related things here on Twitch. You can see the stream title, The Poets of Twitch. Right now I'm reading a published poet, Bukowski, but I spend a lot of my times reading the poems of my chatters. I will write my own poetry on stream sometimes. Overall, it's just like a great, poetic, wonderful time, and we do a lot, right? OMG, I have that shark. Yes, this is Maria. She is the 2/3 Lotus shark, one of our many side characters. I look cozy. I'm very cozy, and we try to make stream cozy. Poetry can be a very vulnerable thing, and sharing poetry can be a very vulnerable thing, and analyzing can be too. So I try to make it as cozy and friendly as I can, and do my best in that regard. For a while, my streams were candlelit, and then I ran out of candles. And yeah, so we try to be cozy. We try to be caring and friendly and community and all that stuff here. And I guess now that my brain is turning on, Unknown Soul, for anyone in my chat who's not familiar, is another wonderful writing streamer. So thank you so much for rating, and everyone in my chat should go check out her stream because she's awesome. She's an October person and like one of like the OGs, I think, who like founded October, if I'm correct. My kid is having a coughing fit, so I'm sorry I need to raid and run. Don't be sorry. Raiding and running is like what you should be doing. You just streamed, you just provided stream for a whole bunch of people, and now you're tired, and you have a kid with a coughing fit. I don't want you watching my stream. Do not apologize. Thank you so much for the raid. Thank you for bringing some people over here. I have a candle right next to me right now, and it's cozy. Yes, I encourage anyone to make yourself cozy, get a nice drink, get a snack, be cozy here with me on stream. I write poetry too, though it's mostly through the eyes of the emotions my characters experience nowadays. That sounds really cool. There's so many different ways to write poetry, and there's certainly no wrong one. Thanking Unknown Soul for the stream. Yeah, I mean, I was in your stream. Thank you for stream. It was a good time. I got some words written. I wrote a poem in your stream. To the fall. Yeah. Have a good one, Unknown Soul. I don't always get to catch your streams, but I'm glad you were like on early this morning, so I was able to drop by. And I think now that all of that is sort of resolved, we're gonna get back to the poetry. For anyone new or old, I mean the old people know this, but I am always taking submissions for things for me to read on stream from viewers. So if you have poetry particularly, or other writing, but I'm better with short things, admittedly. Prose can be a bit daunting. It's not in my wheelhouse so much. But if you want to send in your poetry, new or old, I will absolutely analyze it, give it some love, give it the listening that it deserves. And doesn't matter if you're new, doesn't matter if you're old. I just want to hear your stuff, and I think lots of other people do too. Unknown Soul stream was awesome. Wasn't as productive as I want to be, but I worked a little bit on my bakery rivals to lovers novel, Project Sugar and Spice. Okay, I'm gonna need to hear more about that, because bakery rivals to lovers sounds so awesome as a concept. Like, I mean, I don't know, it's just, yeah, so I feel that's so cute, right? It also, welcome, Stylish Fail. You're glad to see you here. Always a pleasure. But that sounds like a really fun novel. So what we were doing here on stream is reading Bukowski. If I submit stuff to read, does it need to be your own, or can it can just be stuff you enjoy? I've had one of my viewers submit like Robert Browning, and I've had people submit all sorts of different things. So there is no guideline necessarily, as long as it's not like violating Twitch terms, which is pretty hard to do within the context of analyzing poetry. Haha, well, it's about two pretty AF pastry chefs who compete for customers on opposite. Oh, that sounds so good. That sounds so good. They're petty, competitive pastry chefs. Probably super intense, because chefs tend to be. Sounds great. Pain au chocolat. Yes. So anyway, we were Shaking Lemma, where can I read? It looks like we've got interest over here in your book. There's drama, but there's also some sad scenes. You sent something in. And what is your name? Avisis? Send something in. I don't actually know who the author is. If you can find the author, I really do care about giving credit to the person who made it. But if you can't, I will definitely try to on my own. And if it can't be found, then, you know, I'll still read it on stream, right? Might happen today, might not. Nico is like ahead of you in line or whatever. But we were talking about poetry and performance because one of my viewers, one of our excellent community members, Drowning Devil 12, was asking about performing. And what I was saying to them, basically, if anyone else is like wanting to perform poetry or music or that kind of stuff, that my general advice is to find a work that you're really comfortable with reading. Because if you go up on stage and you're not comfortable with your work, I was just saying that the first open mic I ever read at was in a 30... I wrote the poem 30 minutes before the open mic started, and I was the first one to go up on stage because I'm like, oh, whatever, I'll just get it over with, someone has to go first. And I performed really bad. Why is the command not working? Because Streamlabs is... Oh, because I changed the Discord command. Because sometimes you get, like, bot rated, and then people... It's pretty easy to, like, type in exclamation Discord and, like, enter people's Discord. So now it's Island, the Lotus Eaters. Kind of convenient. Some of them have changed. There's some other... It was given you by your priest years ago, but I could try to find it. The original is in Swedish. Okay. That is definitely going to be tricky. I will still read it. And I would absolutely still try to hunt it down myself because I would love to know. And then book is not available just yet. Time zone buddies. Awesome. Yeah, join the Discord. Level 2 on the spice scale. What is the spice scale? Like, is there an actual, like, established, like, hierarchy of what makes something, like, a certain number? I don't think I'm familiar because I'm a poet, not a romance author, admittedly. And before we were talking about performance, performing something you're comfortable with, performing in a location you're comfortable with, not just jumping into something because that can be bad for your anxiety. We were talking about Bukowski's poem, The Best Way to Get Famous is to Run Away. I have been going through, it's sort of a series on the channel and on my YouTube to analyze this work, the Essential Bukowski. We have a lot of fun with it. Bukowski is a pretty controversial figure in, like, the poetic world, and so it's a very interesting thing to read on stream. You get lots of different opinions. He has some interesting things to say, some funny things, some heartfelt things, and some also pretty awful things because he was a bad person. I wrote romance, and I'm also not familiar. Okay, interesting. Enlighten us about the spice scale. And Arson Asher, hey, welcome. I'm trying to get back on track here, doing Bukowski, and I was trying to figure out what to talk about. This is going to make the particular VOD. Oh, I was going to plug the YouTube. I mean, I don't actually know what the Bukowski one is, but if you want to find my YouTube, I think that's the command. Yeah, teapot. The Poets of Twitch, that's the playlist of all, like, the people I do analysis with here on stream, and it's all in there, and then I have a separate series for Bukowski. Mainly a fanfic term? I see. Okay. But for all of those who are just joining in, the overview kind of that we were talking about in this poem is the idea of how one makes art and how you need to run away from something. And what do I mean by that? The best way to get famous is to run away, according to Bukowski. So he would say that, and I applied this more as also a connection to art. And, right, some amount of art is getting recognition, getting famous. Not that that's the only objective, but he says to run away. And then he writes this poem where he digs a hole in the ground and comes up and gets arrested, and then people, like, support him, and he gets to go on TV and has a book deal. And to me, this is saying that if we want to be successful in the world of art, in the world of fame, we need to run away from something that society expects of us. You need to do something different. You can't just do the same thing everyone else is doing artistically. Bukowski would say you have to do something sensational, at least a little bit, or a little bit shocking, or new, or that runs away from something else. And we spend some time talking about current conventions in poetry and how a lot of poetry right now is kind of like either slam poetry and that world or like insta poetry. And we were having this sort of very heavy conversation about how we must run away from the things that are convention to be original. Also, got some messages catch up on, yeah, do that. Don't let me be a distraction from, like, things that matter. Hold up the lotus on lyric. Yes, that's my... You've done 4.5 hours of revision today, Arson Asher. That's impressive. I like the unlurk. No, 2/3 lotus. The Discord is the island of the lotus eater. Like lotus flowers. It's from the Odyssey, the Greek myth. The island of the lotus eaters. Where, I mean, it might be from the Iliad. I don't know, but regardless, it's like this island where you go and you eat the lotus flower and then you can't leave. That's what I'm referencing. The Odyssey? Okay. It's been a while. Religious studies, Arson Azure. Hate butterflies, those are pretty. Hate spiders. You think the author might be Ulla Soderstrom? I'll take it. I'll take a maybe. That's better. And it's funny because the raid came in right at the end of our analysis, and normally the last thing I do is just read over the poem one more time or 2 more times for enjoyment, because a lot of times for me that's what art is about. I want to enjoy it, and if I just, read it at the start, enjoy it, and then analyze it, take all the fun out, and then leave, I don't think it's doing myself. I think it's doing myself a disservice. So I like to read the poem again at the end. So I'm going to read through this. It's a tentative end because if anyone has more questions who's new about this poem, I'd be happy to talk about it more. We just have also been talking about the best way to get famous is to run away for an hour and a half now. But here's the poem. It's quite funny. Do a little reading. The best way to get famous is to run away. I found a loose cement slab outside the ice cream store, tossed it aside and began to dig. The earth was soft and full of worms, and as soon as I was into my waist, size 36, a crowd gathered, but stepped back before my shots of mud. And by the time the police came, I was in below my head. Frightening gophers, eels, and finding bits of golden inlaid skull. They asked me, "Are you looking for oil? Treasure? Gold? The end of China? Are you looking for love? God? A lost keychain?" And little girls, dripping ice cream, peered into my darkness. And a psychiatrist came, and a college professor, and a movie actress, and a bikini, and a Russian spy, and a French spy, and an English spy, and a drama critic, and a bill collector, and an old girlfriend. And they all asked me, "What are you looking for?" And soon it began to rain. Atomic submarines changed course. Tuesday Weld hid behind a newspaper. Jean-Paul Sartre rolled in his sleep, and my hole filled with water. I came out black as Africa, shooting stars and epitaphs, my pockets full of lovely worms, and they took me to their jail and gave me a shower and a nice cell, rent-free. And even now, the people are picketing for my cause. And I've signed contracts to appear on the stage and television, to write a guest column for the local newspaper, and write a book and endorse some products. I have enough money to last me several years at the best hotels, but as soon as I get out of here, I'm gonna find me another loose slab and begin to dig, 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 and this time I'm not coming back. Rain, shine, or bikini. And the reporters keep asking, "Why did you do it?" But I just light my cigarette and smile. Really fun poem. And I think that's all for that, unless other people have questions about it. Okay, a bunch of things here. Thanks for listening to me and my thoughts on Bukowski. Make sure to check out the rest of the series if you enjoyed, and follow or stop by Twitch if you want to see more. See you there.